Thank you, Luella, and thank you very much for having me back. So my name's Nikki Emerton. I'm a neuro-linguistic practitioner, hypnotherapist and life coach. I'm also a lightning process practitioner. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is not what was reported in the journal, which was busting the myths around anxiety and depression. That was last month. But if anybody wants to know more about that, then come and talk to me at the end. I'll quite happily go over the poignant parts of that again and give you some helpers around that. So tonight what we're talking about is how I turn my frown upside down. Now, there are two very different things about tonight's presentation. One is that I'm going to read from a script, which I don't normally do. I'm normally somebody who very much speaks from the heart. But for this particular story, it's very much from the heart. And not to go off track too much and to stay on, I decided that I was going to write a script and stick to it as much as I can. If during what I say there is anything that you want to ask me, then please do, just ask away. This is very much a two-way thing. So the most important thing about tonight is that you guys get something valuable out of what I'm going to say, that you take away something that will help you to get whatever kind of life that you want for yourselves. So that's much more important than what I say, is how you perceive what I say and take away from it. The other difficulty is that I'd forgotten how dark the light was in here. So, right, so how I turned my frown upside down. So I am a neuro-linguistic practitioner, hypnotherapist and life coach, but I wasn't always one of those. My career background is very much in administration. I have a really good attention to detail, which has served me well in doing what I do now. So what I'm going to talk to you tonight is about how I turn my frown upside down, and I'm going to explain to you how I changed anxiety, depression, a life that erred towards those up and down throughout the decades, ill health, and to a life that I look forward to waking up to, one that I know whatever brings, I now have the resilience and the skills to be able to deal with whatever life brings. So looking back, a lot of my childhood was fraught with stress, anxiety and uncertainty. I was born in Hillingdon in Middlesex, which is just on the outskirts of West London. My parents were both only children. One grandmother died before I was born. One was disabled as a result of, while she was pregnant with my mother. One grandfather died when I was about 7 and the other one when I was about 10. So why is this important? Because I had a nuclear family, which meant I was reliant on the skills and resources of my parents. And they were limited. I had no aunts and no uncles, and I had no cousins. My father was what you could best describe as a Victorian father. The slipper or the belt was commonplace, but then again in those days it was. There was nothing unusual about that. My mother was clearly frightened of my father. By her absence, when my brother or myself were being disciplined, she would not be there, but she would make amends in secret after we'd gone to bed. I learnt from a very early age how to feel ashamed, how to feel guilty, how to feel lacking, how to feel worthless, how to feel that I was a disappointment. I was often berated with sharp words and left for long periods of time to think about my actions. And because of that, I created a very sound way of self-criticism to ensure that I did better next time. I didn't know until about 2 years ago that I'm what's described as an empath. And that means I feel others' emotions just by seeing their facial responses, their actions, their unspoken words. So you can imagine how I felt growing up in the environment that I did. But did my parents want that for me? Absolutely not. They did the best that they possibly could. Because if you think about it, when you become a parent yourself, you rapidly learn that you're winging it without an instruction manual. In the same way your own parents did. And after all, what are the entry requirements to become a parent? Nothing like it is to become a doctor or go to university. So, but I was a child and I didn't know any different. I was told that I was fortunate, that I should be grateful, and that I had more than most It was pretty much drummed into me. My conversations with myself became very negative and very sharp.
I am not a stranger to the dark. Hide away, they say, 'cause we don't want your broken parts. I've learned to be ashamed of all my scars. Run away, they say, no one will love you as you are.
These experiences left me ill-equipped to deal with adult life. I was already rock bottom in my early teens. I entered into behaviours that were risky and got myself burnt a few times. By now my parents had divorced, and even that was quite something to have experienced. By the time I was 11, both my parents were completely unavailable to parent me. They were unavailable to guide me, both caught up in their own woes. I became the parent, protecting my mum from my dad, protecting my brother from my dad. Because I was the apple of my dad's eye, I could get away with it. I was the one who was least likely to be reprimanded for standing up for myself. My mum went on to become ill. She'd already been diagnosed with non-epileptic fits. It was the stress that she was under. And before long, after my dad left, she later lost her job through to ill health. And life was tough. It's not much fun finding your mum unconscious upside down, head first down the stairs, and you being too small to move her, too small to know what to do. My pitiful attempt at suicide in my early teens was met with a scoff of "don't be so ridiculous." School didn't know what to do with me. By then I was angry. I was furious at the world. It was letting me down. My mum, my dad, my brother. All of us had created our own little worlds, our own little prisons designed to protect us from each other and also the world around us. And that is how it still is today. The pain of healing is just too great to contemplate. Teachers weren't equipped like they are today. Safeguarding didn't even exist. School knew I was troubled, this bright young girl, throwing her life away, impermeable to any forms of help, and the little help that was available and the few attempts that were made were met with the unyielding, angry wrath of a hormonal teenager. I do feel sorry for I feel really sorry for my teachers. I gave them hell. I was invincible and nobody was ever going to let me down again. So my prison held fast. I left school at 16, having played truant for the majority of the preceding 3 years, with 4 GCSEs, but a drive to be completely financially secure. Because after all, my parents' divorce dictated that my family home be sold when I turned 18. So going to college or university wasn't an option, and to be honest, I hated any form of authority anyway. The anger and the fury of the world remained and was internalised within my own little prison of thoughts. By the time I was 18, I had a mortgage with my fiancé. He was a strong character. He could handle me and I him. He was a breeze compared to my dad, and we had great fun together. I was fiercely independent. After all, I couldn't let myself down. But all along, underneath it all, I wasn't worthy. So my mum remarried, my brother settled down, and we all went our separate ways. So if you fast forward 2 years, and 2 daughters, sleepless nights, postnatal depression ×2, prenatal depression once, suicidal thoughts, where I was told to pull myself together, not be so selfish, and don't you dare turn to your mum, she has enough on your plate. Those were the words that my husband spoke to me. But she could have helped me. That was something she did know about. She had learnt that lesson. But my husband didn't see it that way. Depression was a weakness. I was weak. I was worthless. I was guilty. I was ashamed. And I was a disappointment. All those childhood emotions were being reinforced by the man who was supposed to love me and who was supposed to have my back. I was exhausted. I was drained. I no longer had the strength to manage his strong character. He became dominating and he took control and I allowed it. However, when he became bullying towards my eldest daughter, the worm turned. Unconsciously, specks of my childhood created a response in me that empowered me to take action. The only action I knew how to take was to reject him. I was also in a work environment where I was conversing with people with a different aspect on life, a different map to mine. They respected my opinion, they valued me, and they praised me. That gave me strength. I felt worthy. I felt accomplished. But I didn't believe them. My prison was an open one, but it was still a prison. But I did know that where I was in life was wrong. So I divorced, stuck a calculated pin in the map. Yep, I seriously did that. Got a job and moved my girls to Salisbury. I started afresh. Of course it wasn't that easy, but we would be here for hours if I went through absolutely everything. But that inner voice was still there. The one that had been designed by me, created all those years ago. The one that told me that I was not worthy, that I was a disappointment, I was guilty, I was to blame. I met my partner in the midst of the divorce and moving to Salisbury. He treated me with worth and respect. And I felt like an equal probably for the first time in my entire life. We've been together 17 years and he's my rock. We had 2 children together. One's in my tummy. You can imagine how hard it is to get a picture of 6 of us together because somebody's always taking the photo. So I looked long and hard and this is the best one that I could find because there's always somebody on the other side of the camera. So we had 2 further children, 14 months apart, and that was tough. And the postnatal depression returned, but it was different this time. I was supported, I was loved unconditionally, and I was believed, I was validated. Work, however, didn't take kindly to me having 2 children 14 months apart. They made it difficult, and the prison returned. And work, along with other significant events at that time, were the straw that broke the camel's back. I became ill, very, very ill, with widespread pain all over, which is fibromyalgia or chronic pain. I had chronic fatigue, depression, anxiety. Most importantly, I had out of control thoughts. Loads of medication and hopelessness ensued, as the medical profession just couldn't help. I was overwhelmed. It was like a dozen buses with all the negative, unresolved emotions I had ever experienced, offloading at the bus terminus of my prison door. Offloading all of those thoughts, destructive, negative, sharp, nasty, unkind words. This time, my partner, my rock, wasn't able to ground me. I lost my job. He must have felt helpless to intervene in this apparent self-destruction. I was depressed, anxious, fatigued, self-harming, suicidal and broken. All those decades had caught up with me. But one day, as my daughter brought my medication to me as I lay fatigued in bed, something clicked. My daughter was becoming me, like I was at her age. The parent, the carer, the mother. I sought help. The NHS did their best. but drugs are a bit like a sticking plaster on an arterial bleed. But then I found the lightning process, and this taught me the most valuable tools I have ever learnt. It taught me that my inner voice is the most powerful voice you will ever hear. My prison had become my destruction, although I was not to blame, and that is really important. If my thoughts had created my life as it was, then I had the choice to take responsibility and take back charge of those thoughts. And from 2009 to date, I have put in the same, if not more effort to how I had previously put into my own unconscious destructive thoughts, into resolving, healing, and learning. I've learnt that worry is a bit like a rocking chair. It gives you something to do, but it doesn't get you anywhere. I've learnt that depression is the ability to regret the past or berate yourself for past events. But again, like worry, it gives you something to do, but it doesn't get you anywhere. And I learnt that I had social anxiety. And again, I thought the way that I thought was normal. Because I grew up in a place where I didn't have those extended family, those other people giving me the input to give me a sense of perspective and balance. But like worry and depression, anxiety is catastrophizing future events that are unlikely to happen. It gives you something to do, but it doesn't get you anywhere. But I also learnt, and this is an extract from the lightning process, that like emotions that fire together, wire together. Okay? So if you fire up all of these, anger, frustration, worry, anxiety, self-harm, self-hatred, boredom, illness, tension, irritation, you light one up, you light them all up. Much like the background processes in a computer. If you've ever had a look, there's hundreds of them, have no idea what they do. But they're always running in the background, much like those neuro pathways, our unconscious minds. So I learned how to change my thoughts at will, recognizing that those thoughts serve us very little use, especially about past or future events, neither of which we can change or influence. And I learned to practice the serenity prayer, and I don't mean spout it, I mean do it. If you can't change something, let it go. If you can't change something, don't spend your time, your efforts, your emotions on it. If it is not yours to change, i.e. other people, all the will in the world won't make somebody else do something you want them to. Change those things that you can, which essentially is you. And most importantly, have the wisdom to know the difference. So I learnt how to activate more useful thoughts of happiness, joy, laughter, peace, calm, serenity, lots of calm, even calmer, and even more calm. I fired them up, and they all fired up. And I learnt to flood those old ways of thinking with new ways of thinking until the new became the norm. My inner voice changed. It was filled with compassion, kindness, and understanding. But my sharpest words were my own, and I learnt how to turn it around and flood my thoughts with ones that were useful.
I'm gonna send a bird, gonna drown a mind. This is brave, this is bruised, this is who I'm meant to be. This is new.
those sharpest words were my own, said to myself. And I learnt how to turn that inner critic into that inner cheerleader, that person who always has my back. So this is me just before I did the lightning process on the left. And on the right, this is me completing a marathon. 6 years later, 5.5 years later, and me just running because I can. Running became my therapy, it became my mindfulness, my headspace. So that's not bad for somebody who was told, you'll always have fibromyalgia. That's not bad for somebody who was told, you'll always have chronic fatigue. You're depressed, you're anxious. Don't always believe what you hear. If I can give you anything to take away, then take away these things. That your inner voice will be the most powerful voice you'll ever hear. That no amount of regret can change the past. That no amount of worry can influence the future. The here and now is the only moment that you can influence. And learning to change your thoughts is a bit like learning the times table. Sometimes you'll get it right, sometimes you won't. But with practice, it becomes easy until it becomes automatic. So that's me, that's my story, and I hope you take something really positive away from this and use it to future-proof your future. So thank you.